This is just continuing from the first part of the lecture where we were talking about the sort of gilded, fancy, ornate, clean, pleasant appearance of some of the buildings at the fair, and some really of the dark underside of what made American industrial manufacturing possible at this level and during this time period. So we were looking at the Manufactories Building, which showcased the best of what America had to offer in terms of goods that were produced, shoes, textiles, machine parts, all kinds of things. And then some of the labor that was going on in America at the time that made this possible that wasn't necessarily showcased at the fair. To this end, you also have the Transportation Building, which was very popular, which was showcasing all the best in American innovation and engineering, particularly with the railroads at this time. But you have to ask, is it more important to celebrate the advancements themselves or the people who made that possible? Really, the Chinese Americans and the Irish Americans who dug from east to west and west to east and made the finishing of the Transcontinental Railway possible in 1869. And you can see here too that the making of the railroad in America, and you can see many Chinese laborers who were actually imported from China to work on the railroad before Chinese immigration was actually banned with the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and 1883 in American history. And so you can see there's a celebration of this transportation, but not necessarily the respect and the honoring of the people who actually made the transportation possible going on at the fair. Also, you see the Horticultural Hall, which was an enormous building, which also celebrated American farming and all American farm products and innovations that you could go and see different farm products from different regions and areas of the country if you went into here as well. But it's not really celebrating, again, farm labor, right? What makes the growth and production of these products even possible. Here you have a group of African American women picking cotton in the late 1890s in the South under sharecropping, and you may ask yourself sort of what's changed from slavery, what's changed after the Civil War and Reconstruction, if people are still picking cotton for incredibly low wages. And you can see farm labor happening elsewhere in America, and here you have a group of children hard at work on the farm. So really all of these things, fisheries, horticultural hall, the transportation building, the manufactories building, all of these things celebrating what America actually produced, which was really important at the fair. But also showcased at the fair, and I mentioned this in the first part, in the ethnographic displays, displays of people, displays of American culture and anthropology. You can see a village of Penobscot Indians who were actually on display here with their traditional living quarters. There was an Alaskan Indian village complete with totem poles, and you can see the Indian village recreated here, along with the Alaskan Eskimos who were imported for the months of the fair, and you can see people right in front of the photograph, right in the foreground, actually viewing the exhibition, which is right in front of the trades exhibit. And if you look at some of this imagery, and again you can see right here a fairgoer getting almost nose to nose with a member of a Native American tribe, and if you look at one of the tickets to the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, this one features a Native American in full ceremonial dress. And the grand irony of this in 1893 is what had happened to the Native Americans in the United States throughout the 19th century with the country's westward expansion. Hundreds, thousands of Native Americans were displaced by the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. You can see a train going through reservation land here. This is the same time where the so-called Indian Wars actually come to an end in 1890 with the massacre at Wounded Knee. It's the last of the Indian Wars between the tribes and the United States government. You had forced relocation from the East Coast to Oklahoma and further west during the 1830s under Andrew Jackson. You had disastrous policies of assimilation and removing children from their tribes with the Indian boarding schools movement headed up by the Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, which focused on the removal of the children's attachment to their tribe, to their culture, to their language in a way to Americanize them at this part. So it's very ironic to kind of celebrate the Native American at the fair at the same time that the actual history that had gone on for the past few hundred years was anything but a celebration for the Native Americans. For most people who visited the fair, and you can't really convey this kind of lived sense of what it was like to go and to see this laid out in front of you, the closest thing we have to it would be something like going to Disney World or Disneyland, or particularly Disney World with Epcot Center, where they celebrate different world cultures, and really seeing the giant amusements laid out. And you can see in front of you here that this is a blown up map and a key to the Midway Plaisance, which the Chicago World's Fair was the first World's Fair to have a separate Midway for more low culture entertainment purposes, and all World's Fairs after it actually contained the Midway. And you can see some of the things that happened here. It's a very mixed bag. It's anything from the Ferris wheel, which was invented for this fair, and various ethnic cafes like the Vienna Cafe. You could go to the Irish Industries. You could look at a model of St. Peter's in Rome. You could go to the Indian Bazaar or a working man's home, or an Aztec village, or see the model Eiffel Tower, or look at a log cabin of 1776, or a Colorado gold mine, or an ostrich farm, or a U.S. submarine, or a nursery, military encampment, Sitting Bull's cabin, a Brazilian concert hall, a captive balloon, which is really a hot air balloon that people could ride. You could see the American Indian show. You could look at a volcano panorama, ride on the ice railway. Really, the opportunities for entertainment were endless. One of the biggest entertainments, and this is jetting out into Lake Michigan, and you can see this on the larger map, was the experimental movable sidewalk, which cost an additional 5 cents to ride, and it was built on this special pier. And you could literally, and you could see the moving sidewalk, it goes here and around. You could stand on it for 5 cents and be taken, very much like those moving sidewalks that you see most commonly at airports, where there are actually little chairs that you could sit in and be taken around and treated to a nice view of Lake Michigan. But the novelty of the moving sidewalk was quite something for people in 1893. You also had the Ferris wheel, which was an enormous construction and feat of engineering that was very popular, and you can see the glassed-in boxes here so people would have a view of the skyline of Chicago. But the biggest marvel of the fair for most people was really electricity. And one of the goals of the electricity building at the fair, and you see that here, was to show American visitors that electricity was something to be celebrated and not feared, that electricity equaled progress, and it was a positive advancement for America. But the most lasting display of electricity for most people at the fair was the fact that the fair was open at night, that the fair was in fact electrified. And most Americans from rural parts of the country really hadn't experienced electricity to this magnitude. You really would have only seen this in some of America's biggest cities like New York. So this electrification and the ability to continue this amusement at night because of electricity was really quite a shock to the senses of most Americans who viewed the fair. This is the interior of the electricity building. It gives you a sense of what some of these exhibits looked like. You can see General Electric Company off to the right over here. You can see a giant electric tower here, and then other displays of things like electric fans, all the things that electricity made possible. Some of the products that you're familiar with today and that are really kind of almost immediately associated by people with American popular culture who made their debut at the fair: hamburgers, juicy fruit gum, carbonated soda, cream of wheat cereal, Cracker Jack, shredded wheat, Pabst Blue Ribbon. The beer that sort of had a resurgence in the past few years is actually Pabst Blue Ribbon because it won a blue ribbon. It won a first prize at the fair. Aunt Jemima syrup, and also picture postcards as souvenirs by the United States Post Office make their debut here as well. The fair also made Columbus Day a holiday in the United States for the first time, and it's where the Pledge of Allegiance, that you probably spent most of your elementary years saying while you were in school, also made its debut, was said here for the first time. But more than anything else, the fair encouraged consumption. It encouraged consumption of products, of technology, and of other cultures. There were concessions everywhere in the fairgrounds. A lot of the expositions, a lot of the various exhibits throughout the fair, the thousands of exhibits, also included price tags on items to let you know that you could buy them and you could experience these things at home too, no matter where you came from. And it was also a way to let people know, and this very much continues into the 20th and of course into the 21st century, that spending money, that consuming, that buying these products equaled a way of gaining enjoyment, that spending money could be fun, that consumption was in fact fun. And you see this very much in the experience of souvenirs and people bringing home the fair. This is a silver spoon with an engraving of the electricity building on it. You had Anheuser-Busch corkscrews and knives on one side with the Anheuser-Busch logo, and on the other side an etching of the fairgrounds. You could see various new fishing hooks and baits, and it would show that they were awarded first prize, so people would want to take them home. Here's a fan with the map of the fairground, or a cup and saucer that literally say a souvenir of the World's Fair. The U.S. Treasury made a commemorative coin featuring the U.S. government building. You could bring home a silver mug from the World's Fair, a pen, a straight razor, a collection of photographs in a book, 20 actual photo pictures featuring a trip around the world with foreign villages that were featured at the World's Fair, playing cards, all kinds of things. And so you were encouraged to bring these things home for people who weren't there, but also as souvenirs and memories, in a way of making the fair perpetually live on. One of the items you'll read this week is Thorstein Veblen's Conspicuous Consumption. Veblen was an economist, and this is a piece he wrote towards the end of the century about the ways in which people bought goods in a conspicuous manner, clothing, houses, later cars, and things like that, to kind of display their wealth or aspire to wealth. And this very much becomes a part of American popular culture. Sadly, these souvenirs are really all we have left of the fair. 6 months after it closed, it actually burned to the ground in 1894, which is very much almost a reflection in some ways of the Gilded Age in America and all of the glittering surface versus the realities of what was actually happening in history at this time. Chicago is really up in arms with the Pullman Railroad strike at this time. There's a lot of labor unrest in America, definitely in a financial downturn and a panic, and in many ways the fair helped to take people's minds off of all of this. But it wasn't a lasting thing, right? So all people had at the end, and all really we have at the end, are photographs and memories. In terms of physical buildings of the fair, we really only have two left. One of them is in Chicago, and it's part of one of the museums there. But the major building that's left from the fair is the Maine State Building, which survives at Poland Springs Preservation Park up by Gray and New Gloucester in Poland Springs, Maine. And the reason we have this is because the Ricker family actually bought it, that founded Poland Springs Water, bought it and had it shipped back. And so you need to be thinking about the fair as a symbol of culture, of spectacle, and consumption as you read.